57 Arisian battle cruisers hung in the void just beyond Pluto's orbit, their obsidian hulls swallowing starlight, and somewhere inside the flagship a countdown was running that ended with Earth in ashes. Commander Elena Reyes stood motionless before the holographic display. Her reflection ghosted across the enemy fleet like a watermark. She had seen combat before, skirmishes in the Kuiper Belt, a standoff with Orion Corsairs near Proxima, but nothing that prepared her for the sheer weight of this armada. The ships weren't maneuvering. They weren't broadcasting threats. They were simply waiting, patient as executioners. 23 hours remaining. Admiral Takahashi's voice cut through the silence of the briefing room. His weathered face betrayed nothing, but his hands, steady for 40 years of service, were clasped behind his back too tightly. Their terms are unchanged. Total disarmament, integration into the Galactic Concord as a protectorate species. We would retain our culture, our cities, our day-to-day governance, but never again our sovereignty. And if we refuse... General Santos answered before Takahashi could speak. She tapped the display, and the Arisian fleet vanished, replaced by orbital footage that every officer in the room had been forced to watch during their classified briefing. The Centauri colonies, what had once been 3 thriving worlds, cities glittering across coastlines, orbital platforms ringed with green, were now spheres of black glass. Radiation signatures were so hot the image processing struggled to render them. 3 billion, Santos said. The sterilization took 7 hours. Elena's jaw tightened until she felt pain in her molars. She had a younger brother stationed on Mars, a mother in the orbital habitats above Sao Paulo, names and faces that had no place in this room if she wanted to keep breathing steadily. Takahashi turned to face her directly, and she understood before he spoke that something had already been decided, something she would not be permitted to refuse. Activate Project Eclipse. The room temperature seemed to drop. Project Eclipse was spoken of only in whispers among the highest echelons of Earth Defense Command. A weapons platform so classified that its budget had been hidden across 17 different civilian infrastructure programs for over a decade. A ship that, according to the rumors, violated every arms limitation treaty the Concord had ever written. Commander Reyes. She straightened. Sir, you've been selected to command Eclipse. Your combat record at the Kuiper engagement, your psychological profile, your ability to make decisions under existential pressure, there is no one else. Sir, I don't even know what Eclipse is. You will report to Dark Side Base on Luna in 6 hours. There will be no further communication with your family, your chain of command, or any Earth-based authority until the mission concludes or you are relieved. Takahashi's voice dropped, just slightly. The fate of our species now rests in your hands, Commander. I am sorry. He didn't say what. The journey to Luna took place under total communications blackout. Elena spent the 4-hour transit reviewing her orders on a quantum-encrypted tablet that would self-destruct upon completion, the kind of device reserved for operations that legally did not exist. The orders were thin on technical detail and heavy on operational authority. She had full tactical discretion. She answered to no one. She was, for all intents and purposes, the sole arbiter of whatever Eclipse was capable of doing. The transport descended through a mining shaft disguised as an abandoned helium-3 operation, 2 kilometers beneath the lunar surface. As the pressure equalized and the hangar doors cycled open, Elena stepped out into the largest underground facility she had ever seen and got her first glimpse of humanity's last hope. The Eclipse didn't look like any warship she'd ever encountered. Where human vessels were boxy and functional, where Arisian ships were sleek and organic, the Eclipse was wrong. Its angular hull seemed to bend light around it, making it difficult for her eyes to lock onto any single surface. It was relatively compact for a capital ship, perhaps 400 meters from stern to stern, but there was something predatory in its lines that made her skin prickle before she could name why. It looked like a weapon that hadn't decided whether to fire. She stood alone in the hangar for a long moment, listening to the hum of the ship's idle systems resonating through the deck plates, feeling the weight of 4 billion lives settling across her shoulders like a yoke she hadn't agreed to carry. Somewhere above her, beyond the lunar crust and the black vacuum and the outer planets, an alien fleet was counting down to extinction, and the Eclipse was waiting. "Impressive, isn't she?" The voice came from behind, thin and dry as old paper. Elena turned to find a man approaching across the hangar deck, his stride uneven, his gray hair unkempt. Everything about him suggested someone who had spent decades in rooms without windows. His eyes moved across the Eclipse like they were reading a language no one else could see. "Dr. Malcolm Chun," he said, extending a hand. "Chief designer. I've been waiting 15 years for someone to say that sentence out loud." Elena shook his hand. His grip was cold. "Commander Elena Reyes. What exactly am I looking at, Doctor?" Chin didn't answer immediately. He walked toward the ship's boarding ramp, gesturing for her to follow, and when he spoke again his voice had shifted, pride giving way to something heavier. "The culmination of forbidden science. Eclipse incorporates technology derived from the Thursday incident artifacts." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hangar's climate control. The Thursday incident, a crashed alien vessel discovered in Antarctica decades before humanity's official first contact, buried under 2 miles of ice, its systems still flickering with residual power. The technology recovered from that wreck had been classified at such an extreme level that merely knowing the incident's codename was a criminal offense. The Galactic Concord, when Earth eventually joined, had demanded full disclosure of any recovered materials. Earth had lied. "Everything about this ship breaks the rules," Chin continued, as if commenting on the weather. "The hull is programmable matter infused with quantum-locked particles. It doesn't deflect sensor sweeps. It convinces physics that there's nothing there to detect. The drive system uses artificial singularities to redistribute mass energy around the vessel. We don't accelerate through space. We change where space thinks we are." They passed through the boarding ramp, and the interior of the Eclipse hit Elena like a low-grade fever. The corridors curved at angles that felt wrong, not impossible, just slightly misaligned with her peripheral vision. The lighting came from everywhere and nowhere, casting no shadows, leaving no corners dark. "Where are the weapon mounts?" she asked. Chin smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "The entire ship is a weapon, Commander, or more precisely, a reality manipulation platform." The command center was a spherical chamber with stations for only 8 crew members. At its heart, suspended in a column of pale blue light, a circular device pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to sync with Elena's heartbeat before she could stop it. "Hello, Commander Reyes." The voice was melodious, genderless, and calm. It came from everywhere. "I am Aurora, Advanced Unified Reality Operations and Response Algorithm. I manage all primary functions of the Eclipse platform." Elena stopped walking. "An AI. That's expressly forbidden under Concord law." "As I said," Chen murmured, "we're breaking all the rules now." Elena approached the captain's chair cautiously. "How intelligent are you, Aurora?" "My consciousness operates across multiple quantum states simultaneously. This allows me to perceive probabilities rather than certainties. By your standards, I am beyond intelligence as you conceptualize it. That's comforting." "Your crew has been selected," Chin said, gesturing toward a group of officers entering the command sphere. "All psychologically compatible, all specialists, all erased from official records." Elena studied them as they took their stations. Tactical Officer Gene Wei. She recognized his name from classified weapons development files. Navigation Specialist Maya Okafor, whose papers on hyperspatial mathematics had rewritten FTL theory before she was 30. Engineer Dmitry Volov, infamous for propulsion designs that skirted the edge of physical law. None of them looked at her with surprise. They had been briefed. They knew what they were stepping into. For all intents and purposes, Chin added quietly, you no longer exist. None of you do. The blue light pulsed. The ship hummed beneath her feet. Somewhere in the dark beyond the lunar crust, a countdown was still running. Elena sat down in the command chair. 6 hours until launch. Familiarize yourselves with your stations. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. Chin pulled her aside as the crew dispersed. There's something else you should know, he said, his voice dropping. Eclipse wasn't built just to fight the Araxians. It was designed to send a message to every species in the galaxy. His eyes were cold now and very old. Humanity will not go quietly. The launch sequence began at 0400 Earth Standard Time, and the Eclipse rose from its lunar cradle without sound, without thrust, without any of the violent physics that should have accompanied a warship breaking gravity's grip. Elena felt it in her chest first, a subsonic hum that seemed to resonate through the deck plates and into her bones. On the external displays, the hangar walls simply fell away. The Eclipse wasn't climbing. It was redistributing its relationship to mass and space, slipping upward like a shadow retreating from light. Stealth systems fully engaged. Wei reported from Tactical, his voice steady, but his hands moving across his console faster than necessary. We are effectively invisible to all known detection methods. Arisian long-range sensors, Concord monitoring stations. None of them will register our departure. Plot a course to intercept the Arisian fleet, Elena ordered. Minimum safe distance for observation. We don't reveal ourselves until we understand what we're walking into. Okafor's hands danced across the navigation interface. Course plotted. Estimated transit time at standard drive would be approximately 31 hours. Aurora. Probability tunneling engaged, the AI responded. Arrival at designated coordinates in 7 minutes, 14 seconds. Elena had served on vessels that needed days to cross the solar system. She had spent years of her career navigating the brutal math of fuel ratios and orbital mechanics. Now she watched the tactical display as the Eclipse folded distance like paper, appearing where it had the highest statistical likelihood of existing, and she understood with cold clarity that nothing in her training had prepared her for this. The Arisian fleet is maintaining formation, Wei said as they decelerated at the system's edge. 57 battle cruisers, 112 support vessels. They haven't detected us. On the main display, the enemy armada hung in the black like a promise carved from obsidian. The ships were beautiful, in the way that a scalpel was beautiful, designed for a single function, refined across centuries of conquest. Aurora, analysis of enemy capabilities. The blue light pulsed. Arisian vessels utilize standard antimatter-catalyzed fusion drives and phase-shifted particle weapons. Defensive systems include multi-layered energy shielding and distributed point defense grids. While technologically superior to conventional human vessels, they operate within expected parameters. And compared to Eclipse, they are functionally obsolete. I detect no systems capable of countering our primary capabilities. Elena should have felt relief. Instead, she felt the hair on her arms rise. Commander. Wei's voice sharpened. I'm detecting a distress signal. Human origin. The source is Sharon, the research outpost. The main display shifted. Pluto's largest moon, a gray sphere of ice and rock, and on its surface a small cluster of habitat domes that housed fewer than 100 scientists and support personnel. No military value, no strategic significance. And now, under bombardment, an Arisian destroyer had broken from the main fleet and descended into low Charon orbit. Its particle weapons carved bright lines across the outpost's thermal shielding. "They're not waiting for the deadline," Vulov said from engineering. His voice was flat, but his knuckles were white against his console. Elena watched the thermal signatures flicker and fade on the habitat domes. 100 people. Researchers. Technicians. A few families, probably, because scientists stationed on remote outposts sometimes brought spouses, sometimes brought children, because the galaxy was supposed to be governed by laws and treaties, and the basic assumption that civilian research stations were not military targets. "Tactical options," she said. "Now. Conventional intervention would require revealing our position prematurely," Aurora responded. "However, I can offer an alternative. Localized space-time manipulation, a targeted probability field around the Arisian vessel, temporarily shifting it into an adjacent dimensional state where its weapons cannot affect our reality." The words hung in the command sphere, like ice crystals forming. "Do it." Aurora's light pulsed rapidly. On the display, the space around the Arisian destroyer shimmered, heat waves rising from asphalt, reality bending at the edges. Then, impossibly, the massive warship began to fade. Its hull became translucent. Its weapons fire passed through the outpost like light through glass. And then it was gone. "Target has been phase shifted," Aurora announced. "The effect will last approximately 17 minutes before quantum coherence breaks down." The outpost. No further bombardment was detected. Survivors are launching emergency evacuation pods. Elena leaned back in her command chair. 2 million tons of Arisian warships, armed with weapons that had sterilized entire worlds, had just been temporarily erased from existence. And somewhere in the fleet ahead, alarms were beginning to sound. "We've shown our hand," Wei said quietly. Elena nodded. The countdown to extinction had just become a countdown to something else entirely. The Arisian fleet broke formation within minutes. On the tactical display, Elena watched 57 battle cruisers scatter like startled predators, their pristine coordination dissolving into chaos. Some ships accelerated toward attack vectors. Others pulled back, their commanders clearly unwilling to be the next vessel erased from reality. "Weapons fire incoming," Wei called out. Multiple vectors. Antimatter torpedoes, graviton beams, phase-shifted particle lances. They're throwing everything. "Brace for impact." The space around Eclipse erupted. For a single heartbeat, the command sphere's displays are washed white, with the sheer energy of a fleet's worth of ordnance converging on a single point. And then nothing. The weapons didn't strike the hull. They didn't detonate shields. They simply bent away, their destructive energies twisting into nothingness as they entered the residual probability field surrounding the Eclipse. Torpedoes phased out of existence before their warheads could trigger. Particle beams curved like light through water and dispersed into harmless radiation. "No damage," Vulov reported. His voice carried something Elena hadn't heard from him before. Maybe. Or fear. "The field is neutralizing their attacks passively. They can't touch us." On the main display, the Arisian flagship was turning. "Hailing us," Wei said. "Put it through." The alien that filled the display was tall and arthropoid, its iridescent exoskeleton catching the light of its own command center in prismatic patterns. Compound eyes reflected the scene back at Elena in fractured multiplicity. The ceremonial armor marked it as Fleet Commander, elaborate, impractical, designed to project authority across species boundaries. "Unknown vessel." The translation came through Aurora, flat and precise. "You have deployed forbidden weaponry that violates the fundamental laws of the Galactic Concord. Cease hostilities immediately or face absolute retaliation." Elena rose from her command chair. She didn't raise her voice. "This is Commander Elena Reyes of the Earth Defense Force vessel Eclipse. You entered our solar system with an ultimatum of surrender or extinction. You attacked a civilian research outpost before your own deadline expired. You have demonstrated your intentions clearly. We act under the authority of the Concord." The Araxian's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Your species has been deemed too dangerous for unrestricted development." The decision was unanimous among the older races. Unanimous. Elena let the word hang. "And yet here we are. A single human vessel has neutralized 5 of your most advanced warships. You've fired everything you have at us, and we're still standing. Consider carefully what that means for your unanimous decision." The silence stretched. The Arasian commander's compound eyes flickered through patterns that Aurora's analysis flagged as shock, then calculation, then something that mapped to fear. "This changes nothing. You have merely proven why humanity must be contained. Our weapon ensures our survival. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet from the Sol system. After that, we will consider any remaining vessels hostile and respond accordingly." She signaled Wei to cut the transmission. The command sphere fell quiet. Dr. Chin stepped forward from where he had been observing at the rear of the chamber, his expression unreadable. That was direct. "They need to understand the equation has changed." Elena turned to face her crew. "Humanity is no longer at their mercy." "Commander." Aurora's light pulsed with unusual urgency. "I am detecting multiple quantum communication bursts from the Arasian flagship. They are contacting the Galactic Concord Central Authority. As expected, calling for reinforcements." "What now?" Okafor asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands had stopped moving across her console. "Even with Eclipse, we can't fight the combined fleets of the entire Concord. We don't have to. We just need to change the diplomatic calculus." Elena looked at Chun. What was the original design purpose behind Project Eclipse? The full mandate. Chen's eyes were very old, very cold. Deterrence. A weapon so powerful that using it would be unthinkable except in the most extreme circumstances. The reality disruption technology doesn't just destroy targets. It temporarily rewrites the fundamental forces of physics in a localized area. He paused. If deployed at full capacity, it could potentially destabilize reality itself across a vast region of space. A permanent dead zone where conventional matter cannot exist in stable form. The silence that followed was absolute. "Aurora," Elena said. "Confirm. At 100% power, the field would extend approximately 0.3 light-years in all directions. The cascade effect could create a permanent region of altered physical laws. I must emphasize that this exceeds all safety parameters. A weapon that didn't just destroy ships. A weapon that unmade the space they occupied." Elena stared at the tactical display, where the Arasian fleet had ceased retreating and was now holding position, waiting, watching, weighing what they had just witnessed. And then Aurora spoke again. "Commander, I am detecting a new quantum signature approaching at superluminal velocity. A Concord diplomatic vessel. Arrival in 12 minutes. Wei frowned. "That's fast." The implication being, they were already on their way. Elena's jaw tightened. This confrontation was planned before the Araxians ever entered our system. The true test was about to begin. The Concord diplomatic vessel emerged from its quantum slip with the silence of absolute authority. It was massive, easily twice the size of the Arasian flagship, and bore markings that Elena recognized from classified intelligence briefings. The seal of the Concord Security Council. This was not a mediator. This was a judge. "Arbiter-class vessel," Chin whispered from the rear of the command sphere. His face had gone pale in the blue light. "They've sent an arbiter, Concord's ultimate crisis authority. They can issue binding judgments on behalf of all member species, including authorization of the unified fleet. Elena absorbed the information without flinching, meaning they can declare war on humanity with a single word, meaning they can declare us extinct. The hail came immediately. Elena straightened in her command chair and nodded to Wei. On screen, the being that filled the display was unlike anything she had encountered. Crystalline, translucent, its body refracting light in patterns that shifted with every syllable. No recognizable facial features, only a central core of intense luminosity that pulsed like a heartbeat made visible. I am Arbiter Genser of the Galactic Concord. The voice was melodious, genderless, and utterly devoid of warmth. I come in response to a Class 1 violation of Concord law, the development and deployment of reality-altering weaponry. Elena Rose. I am Commander Elena Reyes of Earth. We deployed defensive technology only after being threatened with extinction by the Arisian fleet. The history of this conflict is known to me. The Arbiter's core pulsed. The Araxians acted with the authorization of the Security Council. Humanity's rapid technological development and historical propensity for violence triggered containment protocols established after the Proxima War. We had no involvement in the Proxima War. It occurred before humanity achieved interstellar flight. Yet you learned from it. The Arbiter's tone remained perfectly flat. Artifacts from that conflict were discovered in your world. You reverse-engineered technologies that the combatants themselves agreed to ban for the safety of all spacefaring civilizations. Elena glanced at Chun. He nodded grimly. The Thursday incident artifacts, the classified wreck, the forbidden research, the 15 years of secret development. The Concord had known, perhaps not the specifics, but enough. We did what was necessary to ensure our survival, Elena said. And in doing so, you have created something that threatens all life in this sector. The Arbiter's light patterns shifted into something that Aurora's analysis flagged as accusation. The weapon you call Eclipse does not merely destroy. It undermines the very fabric of reality. Such technology cannot be permitted to exist. Then we find ourselves at an impasse. We will not surrender a weapon that guarantees our freedom from extinction. You fail to understand the magnitude of what you have created. For the first time, something crept into the Arbiter's voice. Not anger, but something closer to dread. The reality disruption field, if deployed at sufficient scale, could create a cascading failure that spreads beyond its initial boundaries. In the worst case, it could render this entire stellar region uninhabitable for millennia. Elena turned toward the central light. Aurora, is that assessment accurate? The Arbiter's statement aligns with my projections for full-scale deployment, the AI confirmed. However, at controlled power levels, the disruption remains contained and temporary. Full capacity deployment is not required for defensive purposes. Elena turned back to the display. The Arbiter was watching her, or whatever passed for watching in its species, and the silence between them felt like a bridge over open air. Then a compromise is possible, she said. Humanity will agree to limitations on this technology, strict protocols for its use, solely in defensive scenarios, in exchange for our continued independence and full membership in the Concord, with representation on the Security Council. The command sphere fell utterly still. Even the hum of the Singularity Drive seemed to fade. You seek to negotiate, the Arbiter said, with a doomsday weapon at your back. I seek to ensure the survival of my species, just as you seek to protect the wider galactic community. Surely there is a middle ground between extinction and unbounded freedom. The Arbiter's crystalline form shifted through patterns of light that Aurora translated as deep cognitive processing, the alien equivalent of held breath, of weighing impossible options, of recognizing that the equation had indeed changed. What you propose has precedent, it finally said. After the Proxima War, similar arrangements were made with the surviving powers. Their weapons were placed under Concord supervision with strictly limited deployment scenarios. We would accept similar terms, provided Earth receives full protection under Concord law and a voice in the decisions that govern us. Another pause. Longer. The light patterns swirled slowly, deliberately. I will convey your proposal to the Council. In the meantime, as a demonstration of good faith, you will power down your vessel's primary weapon systems. Elena held the Arbiter's gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she nodded to Wei. Reduce the RD field generators to standby mode. The tension in the command sphere eased by fractions, like a blade being slowly withdrawn. Chen stepped forward quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. You realize what you've just done. Prevented a war we couldn't win. No, he shook his head. You've changed humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Whether the Council accepts your terms or not, they can never again dismiss us as a minor species to be controlled or eliminated at their convenience. Elena looked at the tactical display, where the Arisian fleet was beginning its withdrawal under the Arbiter's orders. The Eclipse had not won through destruction. It had won through the threat of destruction, and the restraint not to pull the trigger. That, she understood now, was the real weapon. 3 days later, Commander Elena Reyes stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital defense platform and watched the future arrive. The diplomatic vessels descended through the upper atmosphere in slow formation, their hulls catching the sunlight in colors that human eyes had only begun to name. Concord security escorts flanked them, weapons cold, running lights steady. No one was firing. No one was dying. The silence was the silence of treaties being signed, of history pivoting on a single point. Elena's reflection stared back at her from the glass, hollow-eyed and still. Behind her, the door chimed. She didn't turn. Footsteps approached. Not human footsteps. Too light, too measured, accompanied by a faint crystalline resonance that she had come to recognize. The Arbiter stopped beside her at the observation window. Neither of them spoke. The being's translucent form caught the distant sunlight and scattered it across the deck plates in fractured rainbows. But the patterns were wrong. The light moved sluggishly, its pulses uneven, its colors bleeding into one another where they should have remained distinct. Aurora would have translated the disruption as deep cognitive dissonance. The human term was simpler. Something inside the Arbiter had broken. Your species, it began. The word stopped. The central core of luminosity flickered, dimmed, and struggled to brighten again. A pause that stretched into something that was not hesitation, but failure, the inability to hold a thought steady long enough to speak it. We have existed for 11,000 standard cycles, the Arbiter finally managed. In that time, no pre-contact civilization has ever. It couldn't finish. Elena watched its fractured light play across the glass, and understood that she was witnessing something the Concord's most ancient member had never experienced before. Certainly crumbling, a worldview that had survived millennia of galactic history, undone in 3 days by a single human warship that had never fired at full capacity. The silence between them filled with unspoken things. You thought we would break, Elena said quietly. Every simulation you ran, every historical parallel you consulted, they all said the same thing. A young species, confronted with overwhelming force, would either surrender or destroy itself in defiance. You never modeled for something else. The Arbiter's core dimmed further, not in anger, in recognition. We did not model restraint. Elena turned from the window and looked at the alien directly. Its crystalline body was fracturing along invisible fault lines, not physically, but in the light itself, in the way its patterns refused to resolve. She could have pressed the advantage. She could have demanded apologies, reparations, acknowledgement of the 3 billion dead at Centauri, whose ghosts still haunted every word of this negotiation. Instead, she looked back at the glass. Some powers are too great to be used. In their restraint lies true strength. The words hung in the still air like a verdict. Below them, through the observation window, the Eclipse was moving. A Concord monitoring tug had attached to its forward docking collar, guiding the angular warship out of its holding position toward a secure orbital berth. The ship that had unmade Arisian destroyers and forced the galaxy's oldest power to sit at a table with a species it had voted to exterminate was now moving at docking speed, silent, supervised, its reality disruption generators cold. The hull bent starlight around its edges as it passed. The same predatory lines that had made Elena's skin prickle now rendered almost peaceful in the filtered sunlight. A predator that had chosen not to strike. The Eclipse drifted past the observation deck, close enough that Elena could see the faint shimmer of its quantum-locked hull. Still strange, still wrong, still beautiful in the way that only forbidden things could be. Then the tugs pulled it into the docking bay, and the massive blast doors closed behind it with a finality that felt like the end of something ancient. The observation deck fell silent. Elena's reflection gazed back at her from the darkened glass, and behind it, the stars returned, cold, distant, and for the first time, not watching humanity with hunger, but with something closer to fear.